Good evening, Patriots, and welcome to another edition of the Douglas Ducote Show. Had many pleasure to be tonight. You chose to be here with me, and for that, I'm forever grateful. Thank you for joining tonight's live broadcast. Breaking news tonight will be our top story. The Biden administration authorized the use of deadly force during the FBI's raid on former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida back in August of 2022. As part of his investigation into classified records, court documents revealed. I will repeat that because some of you that are in law enforcement or former law enforcement officers probably went, what the hell did he just say? The administration authorized the use of deadly force during the FBI's raid on former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago in 2022. An operations order produced in discovery is part of Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into Trump's alleged improper retention of classified records, revealed the FBI believed its objective for the Mar-a-Lago raid was to seize classified information, NDI, and U.S. government records as described in the search warrant. The order contained a policy statement regarding the use of deadly force, which states law enforcement officers of the Department of Justice may use deadly force when necessary. The Department of Justice and the FBI agents plan to bring standard issue weapons, ammo, handcuffs, medium and large size bolt cutters, but they were instructed to wear unmarked polo or collared shirts and to keep law enforcement equipment concealed. Trump, as you would imagine, has now come out and responded to this news. Quote, wow, I just came out of the bitch hunt. I just came out of the Biden witch hunt trial in Manhattan, the icebox, and was shown reports that crooked Joe Biden's Department of Justice and their illegal and unconstitutional raid of Mar-a-Lago authorized the FBI to use deadly lethal force, Trump posted on his Truth social media. Now we know for sure that Joe Biden is a serious threat to democracy, Trump added. He is mentally unfit to hold office. 25th Amendment. Now, why is this so important? Some of you that aren't in law enforcement may be asking. No law enforcement agency or its officers need to be instructed in a search warrant that if need be, deadly force is authorized. All law enforcement officers, even the FBI, understand completely the rules of engagement with weapons. If you are shot at, if you are being attacked in any way with any object that could result in the death and fear for your life, then you are authorized to use deadly force. Same thing goes for a civilian. The exact same rules of engagement for deadly force with a police officer is the same for you. Did you know that? If you are in fear of your life, that you have no other choice but to take theirs because they will take yours, there it is. Although we, the people, aren't trained in the law, but law enforcement officers are. They learn this going through the academy, when and when not to use deadly force. I've never in my life heard in a search warrant a statement put in there telling the officers that they're authorized to use deadly force. Never. Mar-a-Lago, by the way, is protected by the United States Secret Service. So did this administration believe that the Secret Service would shoot them when they showed up with a search warrant? I would think not, considering that the FBI and the Department of Justice informed them ahead of time about the warrant and at the time they would arrive. Did they think Trump was going to shoot them? Or did they just hope that Trump was there and made some sort of move that could be considered threatening and therefore shoot him? What is the motive to put such a statement in that warrant? It's like saying to a police officer, if a crime has been committed and you're going to make the arrest, you're authorized to put the bad guy in handcuffs. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up why that was put in this warrant. Other than, once again, to show you the weaponization of not just our FBI or Department of Justice, but as we're watching with the trials that Trump is up against and going through, our justice system, our two-tier justice system, one for Democrats and one for Donald Trump and his supporters. What we're watching happen is a travesty on so many levels all across our country by those in power. Former President Trump's legal team was slated to call on a former commissioner of the Federal Election Commission to testify in the New York versus Trump case. But the expert testimony was not heard after the presiding judge curbed the scope of what he could discuss before the jury. Therefore, they all rest their case. Judge Merchant has so restricted my testimony that the defense has decided to not even call me. Now, it's elementary that the judge instructs the jury on the law, so understand his reluctance. Former FEC Commissioner Bradley Smith posted on his X account. Smith is an election law expert who Trump has called the Rolls-Royce of experts in the field. But he will not testify after Judge Juan Merchant ruled that Smith could speak before the court on the basic definitions surrounding election law, but not expand beyond the scope. Now let's stop there for a second. This so-called judge not only allowed a case that was turned down by the federal government, the Department of Justice, federal DAs, state DAs, but also was already past its prime and legally could not be brought forward. Statute of limitations had run out. Not only allowed it in, but then put a gag order on the person who's being charged and not allow them to talk. But yet did not say anything or do anything into such to the prosecution's witnesses. They allowed Stormy Daniels to continue to say whatever she wanted to say. Same thing with Michael Cohen. Hell, Michael Cohen even has his own podcast spewing all kinds of hateful shit against Donald Trump. But anything that would help the defense of Trump, this judge has saw to it that it gets squashed. Trump, as you all know, has been charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree in this particular case in New York. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Briggs must prove to the jury that not only did Trump falsify the business records related to payments to former porn actress Stormy Daniels, but that he did so in furtherance of another crime, conspiracy to promote or prevent election. Back to Smith. Smith served as the FEC commissioner and chair between 2000 and 2005. The FEC is the U.S. agency dictated to enforce campaign finance laws. So therefore, when it comes to this case that Braggs has brought, why not have the leading expert testify? Well, because it goes against their narrative and it will not look good for their case. So the judge would not allow it. His testimony was slated to shed light on prosecutors' allegations that Trump falsified business records, which is a misdemeanor and has already passed the statute of limitations, as I already told you about. But the DA and this judge don't care about the letter of law. They literally made the law up as the case went along. Smith wrote on social media that while the prosecutor's star witness, Michael Cohen, was allowed to go on at length about whether and how his activity violated the Federal Election Campaign Act, he was barred from broadening the scope of this previous anticipated testimony, which effectively led the jury getting its instructions on the FEC from no other than Michael Cohen. Smith spoke with the Washington Examiner yesterday and discussed what he would have said in court had he been allowed to testify. Judges instruct the jury on the law, Smith told the outlet, and they don't want a battle of competing experts saying, here's what the law is. They feel it's their province to make that determination. The problem, of course, is that campaign finance law is extremely complex, and just reading the statute to people isn't really going to help them very much. The case surrounding Trump's payment is one that both the Justice Department and the FEC rejected to prosecute in recent years. The Justice Department in 2019 effectively concluded its investigation into Trump's, what Braggs claim is campaign interference and illegal to pay Stormy Daniels. On 2021, the Federal Elections Commission announced that it had dropped a case looking into whether Trump had violated election laws for the payment to Daniels. Smith had previously told all news outlets that the Federal Elections Commission chose not to act on this. DA Braggs, in this case, waited. I think it was almost a year before even bringing the charges, trying to dissect the laws and figure out how to pull this off. And I think that's because the charges were flimsy. And as you know, the prior DA said no, they're not going to bring this. The Department of Justice said no, they're not going to bring this. The Federal Elections Commission said no, but DA Braggs, when he got increased political pressure from the Democrat Party, plus the fact that he ran for office in the area of the country that is anti-Trump, elect me and I will bring this case to court, felt he was cornered and didn't have a choice. Smith also wrote an opinion piece published by the Federalist last month when the trial kicked off, arguing that Bragg's office had one big problem with the case. The prosecution's theory is that Trump's payment to Daniels were campaign expenditures and therefore needed to be publicly reported as such. But not reporting the expenditures, the theory goes, Trump prevented the public from knowing information that might have influenced their votes, he wrote in the opinion piece. There's one big problem with this theory. The payment to Daniels was not done with campaign payments or campaign money. It was done by Michael Cohen with money he got from mortgaging his house. He said political candidates frequently act in ways that could be interpreted as serving a purpose to influence an election. That politicians could get their teeth whitened or buy a new shirt or campaign funds to look snappier on the campaign trail. That's because in campaign finance law, these types of expenditures are known as personal use. FECA specifically prohibits the conversation of campaign funds for personal use, defined as expenditures used to fulfill any commitment, obligation, or expense that would exist in respective of the candidate's election campaign. Smith continued on X today that Bragg's case hinges on prosecutors proving that Trump tried to influence an election through unlawful means. But the office has to rely on their evidence, as the DOJ and the FEC both denied pursuing this case and said there is no crime there. If that's the case, isn't it entirely relevant, not dispositive, but relevant to the jury fact-finding on that question that neither the Department of Justice nor the FEC chose to prosecute? But Judge Merchant won't allow that in. He will, though, allow in numerous references to Cohen's guilty plea and allow Cohen to testify as to how he thinks he and Trump violated the FECA, though it appears that Cohen is a dunce about campaign finance law. The defense team rested today, and Merchant dismissed the jury until after Memorial Day. Closing arguments are anticipated to kick off next Tuesday following the holiday. If you've been following this case, like I have, look, let me explain to you something that's going to happen, one way or the other. Whether or not Trump is found guilty or not guilty, it's irrelevant with what I'm going to share with you. What has to happen from what the conduct that we've witnessed from this judge, the procedures need to be done to bar him, kick him out completely. No longer to be a judge and no longer allowed to practice law, because he is a biased son of a bitch who only cares about the Democrats and bending and shaping the law to a DA who campaigned on elect me, I will get Donald Trump. And he's a judge who supported not only the Democrat Party, but Biden himself. His daughter not only served with the Democrat Party, the DNC, but also for Kamala Harris and her campaign. That in itself should have made him do the moral thing of accusing himself from the case. But hell no, because there's an agenda here. We are on our last-ditch effort to stop Donald Trump from becoming president of the United States again. So we're going to throw everything we possibly can at the wall in hopes and pray that something sticks. That's all this is. They know there's no case here. This has been going on for over 30 days. And at no time did the prosecution ever show me or anyone else that knows anything about the law that slamming rock of here's your evidence. It did not take place. So they hung all their apples, put them all in one basket, basically, on a convicted felon, convicted perjurer, a known liar, a person that admitted in court that he would do anything to take down Donald Trump, Michael Cohen. That's who they hung it all on. And Trump's defense destroyed Michael Cohen. So the only way this is going to work, and we will talk about this again before the night's over with, is if these 12 jurors are also anti-Trump and they don't give a shit what's being said. They're not even listening or paying attention to it. They're just going to go in there and go, guess what? The orange man's guilty because we don't like him. He sent out mean tweets. Anti-Trump CNN allowed an opinion piece today by Manhattan criminal defense attorney Stacey Snyder that was titled, "I changed my mind about the strength of the prosecution's case against Donald Trump, and here's why." CNN allowed this. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office made a significant tactical error announcing they were resting their case after calling Michael Cohen as their final witness in the Donald Trump hush money trial. But it's not because of Cohen alone. A convicted felon and disbarred lawyer was a bad witness. He actually did pretty well in responding to the prosecution's warm-up when confronted with his prior bad acts, convictions, and bias towards the former president, staying steady on the stand and not losing his composure. But Cohen lost his footing. That's putting it mildly, by the way. During cross-examination, where he admitted important information when recounting an October 2016 phone call he claims he had with Trump to discuss the hush money payment. The heated exchange between Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, and Cohen marked the biggest blow to the prosecution's case and ended it, literally ended it. And any judge that had moral background and a spine would have threw this out at this point, but not this guy. The prosecution, though, so far, had done a good job of backing up Cohen's expected testimony by preventing other witnesses to bluster crucial factual facts and provide Trump's motives in alleged buying off attorney or adult film star Stormy Daniels' silence, so her story on sexual encounters with Trump wouldn't damage his 2016 prospects. The jury heard the testimony of David Pecker, the former CEO of the National Enquirer publisher, American Media Inc., Keith Davidson, Daniels' attorney who brokered the deal, Hope Hicks, Trump's former aide and campaign communications director, and even Daniels herself, who the judge allowed to say shit that was completely irrelevant to this case, dealing with sexual stuff. What the prosecution left out of this case, however, is a second key witness to establish that Trump intended to falsify his business records to cover up another crime. Cohen's testimony so far served to prove the elements of an alleged other crime, that the hush money payments resulted from a conspiracy to commit campaign interference or to make an illegal campaign contribution. But the DA also must prove the actual business records crime for which Trump has been charged with 34 counts of falsifying the business records in the first degree. How I see it, Cohen's testimony only satisfied half the equation beyond a reasonable doubt. According to Cohen's testimony, there were 3 people in the room at the Trump Tower meeting after the 2016 election to discuss his expected reimbursement for Daniels' payment: Cohen, Trump, and Alan Weisselberg, then chief financial officer of Trump Organization. Given Cohen's credibility problems, it would make a stronger case for the DA's office to call a second witness to back up Cohen's claims. Weisselberg could be the linchpin to validate Cohen's claims, but Trump agreeing to reimburse him through the Trump Organization as a business expense. The former CFO presumably knows about Trump's organization books and whatever Trump's hands were in them. The obvious choice would be to call Weiselberg to close any gaps in Cohen's story if the jurors chose to discredit testimony that Trump knew and approved the plan. But the prosecutors have a problem. Weiselberg also has credibility issues. Namely, he's been convicted of lying under oath. The DA's office told Judge Juan Merchant outside the presence of the jury that they believe his interests right now are very aligned with the defendants, implementing that they don't expect him to tell the truth on the stand. The DA is not allowed to impeach their own witness, so the safest thing for them to do is not call him at all. It leaves a hole in the prosecutor's case. It's unlikely he will ever see Trump take the stand to explain his version. He appears to have calmed down and gotten used to the cadence in the trial. I expect him to continue to listen to his lawyers and exercise his right to remain silent. He has too much to lose. He would not want to risk living through more questions about his alleged affair with Daniels and his friendship with Pecker, who, from his trial testimony, appears to know many of Trump's secrets. The former president knows that if he takes the stand, he won't be able to close his eyes and zone out. He will have to rely and relive the unsavory details of the prosecution's case all over again. While Cohen did an effective job testifying about the first half of the scheme to influence the election by buying Daniel's story and keeping it quiet, he doesn't know what happened when the business records that were subject to the 34-count indictment were created. He wasn't working for the Trump Organization in 2017 when the reimbursement began. He was a lawyer and not a bookkeeper. If one juror was uncertain about whether Trump was involved with how Cohen's payback was recorded on the records and by whom, there'd be a hung jury and Trump would walk free. Madeleine Westhout, Trump's personal secretary in the Oval Office, gave the defense team its biggest gift. She testified that Trump sometimes multitasked and that she had seen him sign, a bunch of checks while on the phone or engaging in other activities. The defense can easily argue that Trump was running the presidency in D.C. and no longer micromanaging what was going on in New York at the Trump Organization. He signed checks put in front of him. They could have easily been part of a busy work pile to be FedEx back to the company with Trump barely paying any attention. If so, there would have been no intent to falsify the business records. Without Weiselberg's testimony about what Trump knew or intended, the prosecution only has Cohen to rely upon. Cohen, a convicted felon, known liar, and perjurer. So the DA felt that this convicted felon, known liar, and perjurer, the jury would take his word only because he hates Trump, as opposed to somebody that can back up his story that doesn't hate Trump. You see where that went? So, what has DA Braggs and the corrupt judge accomplished so far with this case and keeping Donald Trump off the campaign trail and tied up in the courtroom? What have they managed to accomplish so far? Well, here's what. Former President Donald Trump and his Republican Party raised $25 million more than President Joe Biden and the Democrat Party raised in the month of April. I'll repeat that. This sham trial and corrupt use of our justice system cost these idiots $25 million. According to the Associated Press, while the former president and the Republican Party raised $76 million in April, Biden and the Democrat National Committee only raised approximately $51 million. In a statement released yesterday by Trump campaign press secretary Carolina Levitt, the former president's campaign highlighted Trump's strong fundraising numbers despite being forced to spend a large portion of his time in a New York courtroom instead of campaigning across the country. The statement also blasted Biden's campaign for relying on out-of-touch billionaires. The only people left in America who support crooked Joe Biden by releasing their money are out-of-touch billionaires in Hollywood. And it turns out even they are done giving up their money to a failing campaign. President Trump and the RNC significantly outraised Biden and the Democrats in the months of April, thanks to the support of millions of small dollar donors from every state across the country. Levitt added that Trump fundraising numbers are especially remarkable in light of him being confined to a courtroom for nearly 9 hours a day over the past 4 weeks, fighting against Biden's corrupt trial. The Trump campaign press secretary suggested that Trump's fundraising ability and his increasingly dominant position in the polls prove 3 different points. The momentum is 100% on President Trump's side. Americans see the truth about Joe Biden's witch hunt trial in New York, and they want President Trump back in the White House to make America great again. The Associated Press noted that Biden's April fundraising total was significantly less than the over $90 million the president's campaign raised in March. While Biden's campaign said it had $192 million cash on hand at the end of the month, the Associated Press reported that his campaign had roughly the same amount of cash on hand at the end of March, indicating that the president's campaign was spending money as quickly as it was being raised. We're worried, a Biden campaign email stated, according to the Post-Millennium. We're not even close to the amount we raised last month at this point. Bottom line, these liberal Democrat, Trump derangement syndrome, anti-American idiots hell-bent on weaponizing our justice system in their favor is what will put Donald J. Trump back in the White House. And the only way Trump gets convicted in this case is if these 12 jurors also have Trump derangement syndrome. Ever wonder what Mike calls American patriots? Not these J6 protesters our justice system is destroying, to rise up and take to the streets and take back this country? Ever wonder what it would take to get, real patriots to stand up and do the same shit that we see Antifa do and Black Lives Matter do? And anti-Israel protesters. Basically, what would it take patriots to start a civil war? Convict Donald J. Trump and put him in jail off the evidence we, the people, have heard in this trial. And we might see America involved in total chaos. I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again. This administration has weaponized our FBI and our Department of Justice in their favor, turning it into a two-tier justice system. One for Democrats and another for Trump and his supporters. Lady Justice wears a blindfold for a reason, yet you would not know it. With this current administration, Joe Biden, the head law enforcement officer in America, as being the president, that's your position. You appoint who's going to be the FBI director and who's going to run the Department of Justice. Well, those people, in their minds, don't give a shit about that blindfold. Now, I pray that we do not see a civil war in America ever again. In this case, it wouldn't be a civil war over what the liberals claimed the last Civil War was about, which was the South wanting to keep slaves enslaved. No, this would be a civil war over American patriots saying we've had enough of you destroying our country, our Constitution, and our justice system. Let's pray it never comes to that. Because if it ever did, if real American patriots, I'm talking about men and women that love this country and this Constitution, that are watching what's happening, going, this is criminal, and our veterans and our veteran law enforcement officers, you know, the people that have the most guns in America, were to take to the streets and say, we've had enough, it would make what happened on J6 look like a fucking Boy Scout convention. And that's what they're afraid of. And that's why the Democrats have spent so much time and effort and money to take away our Second Amendment rights. Now, as we all know, and as I've said many times before, the system has been rigged. That's right. They have took out of the Constitution part of the Second Amendment. And that's the part of what it was actually put there for. The Second Amendment wasn't put there for hunting. It wasn't put there for your self-protection from your neighbor or a bad guy breaking into your house. It was put there by our founding fathers for we the people to rise up against a tyranny government. But it has been manipulated in a way, thanks to cell phones and computers and technology, that the Department of Justice and the FBI are able to monitor everything you do. Talking in your house, they can hear you through all these freaking devices we have. They can monitor your email. They can monitor your text messages on your phone. They can monitor your phone conversations. There is no way possible for anyone to organize a major Take Back America and go to the streets the way the Constitution was written for the Second Amendment. The FBI would come beating your door down and hauling your ass off to jail in a heartbeat. It wouldn't matter unless a few million people all at once said, fuck it. The point is, we better start praying for our country. Because I personally am watching some things happen that's being done under the rule of law that's not lawful, that goes against our Constitution in more ways than one. Joe Biden is running out of excuses, while many Democrats have urged him to end his re-election bid, including friendly columnists like the New York Times' Ezra Klein and Washington Post David Langton. It has been the conventional wisdom that Biden could not do so, fearful that even less popular Kamala Harris would replace him as the 2024 Democrat candidate to become president. That is changing. Vice President Harris has been out on the stump, performing the kind of out of the energetic campaigning that the president cannot do. She meets almost daily with women groups talking about abortions and black groups talking about racial justice. She travels increasingly to swing states to hand out money and programs. Created the Biden-Harris White House, emphasis on Harris, with passing the enormous spending bills at the heart of the administration's campaign. She also frequently entertains important Democrats at her home in Washington, getting to know the important power brokers. Quietly, off the radar, even as she is being virtually ignored by Republican analysts and commentators, Harris' efforts are paying off. Harris' overall approving rating of 38%, a net of 11% disapproving, on average today are slightly better than those of her boss, net 17% disapproving, and they have improved since the beginning of the year, when her net disapproval was above 17%, and Biden's was not. Importantly, recent surveys show she is more popular with black voters, where Biden has suffered a serious swoon, than the president. Harris could make a solid case that she can carry on the Obama-Biden agenda and that she is healthy and fit to serve 4 more years. If a large portion of Biden's unpopularity is due to his age, well, Harris would be a significant upgrade. Harris' improved posture comes at a pivoting time in the campaign and for Joe Biden. Scheduling the first 2 presidential debates on June 27th, way earlier than usual in the election calendar, has triggered renewed speculation about Democrats dumping Biden at their convention. Some think that the timing of the face-off with Donald Trump, many weeks ahead of the August 19th gathering in Chicago, is intended to give Democrats some opportunity to look at what they're faced with. Now, I'll stop there for just a second, and I will remind you, those that watch this program on a regular basis, that you've heard me say many, many times that Joe Biden will not make it to the November election as being on that ballot. Either he's going to trip and fall and break his neck, or they're going to pull him out because they're going to say he's not mentally capable of performing anymore, or the convention's just going to go, fuck it, this guy's so down in the polls, we're going to throw somebody else in there. That's been my prediction all along. Recently, I've said maybe that's not going to be the case because Biden's still going at it. They haven't done anything yet to remove him. But I know for a fact behind the scenes what the Democrats are thinking. And that is Joe Biden this time around, because the American people have had 4 years to suffer under this administration, understand what another 4 years will do to this country. And they're not going to vote for him. If the debate is a complete disaster, it is thought the party will have enough time to regroup and consider an alternative before their convention. Recent polls showing former President Trump leading in critical swing states promise disaster for Biden in November. Not only for Biden, but possibly for down-ballot candidates as well. Vulnerable Senate candidates in toss-up states like Pennsylvania and Nevada were reportedly distancing themselves from Joe Biden, fearful of being dragged down by the top of the ticket. But what about all those primaries? Is it even possible to ditch Biden? The answer is yes. During the Democrat convention, the party could technically decide to pick another candidate if Biden withdrew from the race, or if the majority of the delegates were persuaded that the president was not up to the task. There are 4,000 delegates who elect the party nominee, and roughly 700 so-called superdelegates who step in only if there's no apparent winner on the first round of voting. There is no legal obligation for any of those delegates to back Joe Biden. In an event of some clarity, a health problem, for instance, or humiliating defeat in the debate, the majority could choose someone to replace the president. Or the party could finally persuade Biden to just step aside. Some political analysts have expected him to do so for months, even me. Considering his age and his declining popularity and his mental decline. Despite considerable pressure, Joe Biden has hung on, perhaps knowing he could best protect his son, Hunter, from the Oval Office because his wife, Jill, has encouraged him to run again, or maybe because Harris' weak standing. For the first 3 years of his presidency, Biden outshone Harris, who repeatedly got tangled up in hilarious word salads, but more importantly, was tagged with accomplishing little and especially doing nothing about the open border that Joe put her in charge of. Though Harris' approval ratings are still poor, she is arguably more capable than Joe Biden is. If Democrat bosses decide to open up the convention to other candidates in order to keep the party from splitting wide open, Vice President Harris is likely to prevail. That is what happened in 1968. When Lyndon Johnson announced he was withdrawing from the presidential race on March 31st, 1968, his approval ratings were about 36%, according to Gallup, only slightly worse than Biden's are today. LBJ knew his chances were dim, given anger about the Vietnam War, and took himself out of the convention. At the Democrat convention that year, delegates picked Johnson's vice president, Hubert Humphreys, to succeed him in the 1968 candidate, despite many within the party seeking anti-war candidate. Humphreys was not popular. Only 34% of the country supported him on the eve of the convention, compared to 40% backing Richard Nixon and 17% leaning towards the segregationist former Democrat George Wallace, who was a racist bigot and was best friends with the Clintons and ran as an independent. But nominating Humphreys was the least contentious of possible outcomes in the end. Democrat power brokers opt for harmony. The decision did not go well. Humphreys lost that year to Richard Nixon in a tight election. The reality for Democrats is that if they open up the convention to considering other candidates, Kamala Harris will likely emerge as the nominee. She will not leave the game without fighting. And like Humphreys, the vice president will be the least contentious of alternatives, for sure. Governor Gavin Newsom, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitman, and others might throw their hats in the ring, but neither has done the coast-to-coast pot licking so necessary to build their case. And black leaders who put Joe Biden in the Oval Office would almost certainly prefer Harris. Humphreys lost, but he went from basement-level approval ratings to nearly winning. It's possible that Harris could do the same. Democrats may have no other choice. And I will tell you right now, they don't have any other choice. But she's not going to save them. Now, let's talk seriously for a moment about the subject of mental health. Think about this. At what point should family and friends step in to stop their loved one, who is an elderly person, from driving, from walking unassisted, from running a business, or being the president of the United States. There are many reasons under many different circumstances that such action should be taken. Because you don't want your loved one to get hurt physically or embarrassed in public. Dementia is just one reason, or any sort of mental decline. Well, I keep asking that question every time I see a video of Joe Biden speaking in public, walking, climbing stairs, or riding a bike. Joe Biden now claims, are you ready for this? That he was vice president during the coronavirus pandemic when it kicked off, and that former President Barack Obama had dispatched him to Detroit to help in the response. In comments, first reported by the New York Post, Biden addressing the NAACP campaign event in Michigan this past Sunday night, where he repeatedly railed against his Republican opponent, former President Trump, who was in office when COVID started, not Biden. Biden said, and I quote, "When I was vice president, things were kind of bad during the pandemic. And what happened was Barack said to me, go to Detroit and help fix it." Going on to reference Detroit Democrat Mayor Mike Duggan, who is seated next to Biden. The president continued, "Well, the poor mayor, he spent more time with me than he ever thought he's going to have to." Elsewhere in the speech, Biden referenced working with civil rights activists in his youth and said that Detroit helped put food on his family table as his father, Joseph Biden Sr., was in the automotive business. Reserving much of his remarks to criticize Trump, Biden claimed at one juncture that MAGA Republicans want to engage in book banning and other endeavors he described as extremist. What books? LGBTQ books in elementary school? Those, maybe? I think black people want those out too. All that progress is at risk. Trump is trying to make the country forget just how dark things were when he was president, Biden said. Biden also likes to say that his son, Beau Biden, died while serving in Iraq. He did not. He died of brain cancer right here in America. Joe Biden claims his uncle was eaten by cannibals. Another story that's just not true. Telling the story how lightning had once struck a pond outside his home, sparking a fire. To make a long story short, I almost lost my wife, my 67 Corvette, and my cat, he said, adding all kidding aside, when it was just a kitchen fire contained to the kitchen only. At least 10 times as president, most recently during a speech in Milwaukee, Biden has told a heartwarming story about an Amtrak conductor named Angelo Narger, who congratulated him for traveling more on Amtrak than he had on Air Force planes as vice president. Yet, Angelo Narger actually existed. He's a real guy. But he died 16 years before Joe Biden was vice president. 3 times this year, and at least 7 times since 2014, Biden has told a version, most recently on August 10th of last year, of a story about words his father supposedly spoke after a teenage Biden saw 2 well-dressed men in suits kiss each other in downtown Wilmington in the early 1960s. Joey, it's simple. They love each other, Biden's father is said to have remarked. Biden usually mentions this story when discussing any LGBT events, speeches that he gives, anything on gay issues. But there are reasons to be skeptical because Biden depicts a scene that would have been unusual 6 decades ago. He describes this exchange with his father usually as taking place in 1961. But back then, gay men generally did not kiss in public. Many people regarded homosexuality back then as deviant. Moreover, Biden's story has evolved over time. In 2014, in a New York Times article on his evolution of the same-sex marriage, he was the father in the story, speaking to one of his sons, not the other way around. In an article, Biden's father figure in a different story on a similar theme, forcing a friend to apologize after insulting a gay couple at a Delaware beach. But in 1987, Biden told the Los Angeles Times yet another version that his father had lectured him after he tried to put off a visit to a gay couple who were strong supporters of the senator and shared an apartment at a Delaware beach. Biden has told stories that he had a role in civil rights movements, but the facts show that he participated only in one walkout at a restaurant and picketed a segregated movie theater. And yet sometimes he tells stories about how he was arrested for advocating on behalf of Black people. He was never arrested. 4 times, including once as president, Biden has suggested he was arrested for standing on the porch of a Black couple who were subject to demonstrations. Sometimes he says that his mother warned him not to go to the protest. Remember, I told you not to go down there, honey, because everyone is protesting and you got arrested standing with the family on the porch. He said his mother told him in a version he recounted in 2017. Twice, Biden said the police merely brought him back home from the protest after he stood on the porch. But when the story was investigated by many news outlets, the story did not add up. There was a protest of a Black couple who had purchased a home in an all-white area, but it was a neighborhood many miles from the Biden home. Biden instead appears to be referencing to a protest that took place outside the home of the real estate agent who was involved in the sale. That was near where he lived as a teenager at the time. Campaigning for presidency in 2020, Biden 3 times claimed he was arrested in South Africa while trying to see Nelson Mandela, who at the time was in prison in Rhode Island near Cape Town. When determining that was false, he admitted his statement to say he was stopped at an airport while traveling with a congressional delegation to see Nelson Mandela by police, though others that were on that trip said that didn't happen either. Besides his father, Biden's grandfather, uncle, and other family members appear as regular characters in his speeches that are just not true. But the stories he tells are not plausible. Speaking of veterans in December, Biden recalled how his Uncle Frank fought in the Battle of the Bulge during World War II and was awarded the Purple Heart but never received it. He said that after he became vice president in 2009, he arranged to present the medal to his uncle with the rest of the family in attendance. But you see, the problem with that is that his Uncle Frank H. Biden died in 1999, a decade before Biden became vice president. Neither his obituary nor tombstone mention anything about a Purple Heart awarded to soldiers killed or wounded while serving in action with combat. Biden, another uncle, Ambrosia J. Finnegan Jr., who is listed as missing in action during the war. Biden has described him as being shot down during a reconnaissance flight. Twice this year, most recently in Milwaukee's speech, Biden has claimed his grandfather, an all-company executive, died in the same hospital just before Biden was born there himself. In April, it was 2 weeks before. In August, it was 6 days. But Biden's grandfather, Joseph H. Biden, died at Johns Hopkins Hospital on September 26, 1941, according to the obituary. Biden was born at St. Mary's Hospital in Scranton, Pennsylvania on November 20th, 1942, 14 months later. His grandfather, Ambrose Finnegan, died at St. Mary's, but in 1957, nearly 15 years later. Biden had an awkward moment during a rally in Columbus, Missouri, where at the start of his remarks, he pointed out several state lawmakers in the audience for praise. When he got to Chuck Graham, a state senator from Green Meadows that Biden personally knew and was friends with, Biden urged the lawmaker to stand up. Stand up, Chuck, let him see you. But Biden had forgotten, obviously, that he's in a wheelchair and he can't stand. He's paralyzed. Joe Biden has faced scrutiny for his repeated claims of interacting with deceased individuals. That's right. Joe Biden has the power to talk to dead people, including world leaders and public figures. These incidents have raised concerns about his mental state. Biden recalled a conversation with German Chancellor and French President at the G7 summit in 2021, despite both leaders having died in 2017 and 1996, respectively. Helmut Kohl of Germany looked at me and said, "What would you say, Mr. President, if you picked up the London Times tomorrow morning and learned there's 1,000 broken down doors of the British Parliament, killed some people on the way in to deny the next prime minister to take office? And you think, what would you think?" Biden claimed at the event, yet besides the story not being true because the man was dead, the story he told was incoherent, to say the least. In 2019, Biden referred to a conversation with former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher instead of Theresa May, showcasing another instance of confusion regarding deceased leaders. Margaret Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher, fraudulent slip, he said at the time, before realizing his mistake and correcting himself. But I know her too. During a conference in September 2022, Biden mentioned deceased Indiana Republican Representative Jackie Wartrick, who he was there to talk about her service to the country because she was dead. And for the time he went on stage, he forgot why he was there and stood there and said, "Jackie," as he's looking through the crowd, "are you here? Where's Jackie?" Biden said as he looked in the crowd of lawmakers. "She must not be here," he said. In a speech in November 2022, Biden referenced a conversation with an inventor of insulin, Canadian medical scientist and physician Frederick Banton, despite the latter having died in 1941. Do you know how much it costs to make that insulin drug for diabetics? It was invented by a man who did not patent it because he wanted it available for everyone. I spoke with him, Biden claimed. Public concerns about President Biden's mental and physical health persist. According to a recent NBC poll, a total of 76% of voters expressed major or moderate concerns regarding Biden's ability to serve a second term as president, citing worries about his mental activity and physical stamina. And we are 7 minutes past the 9 o'clock hour, and I'm going to continue with this last story. Thank you for staying with me, for those of you that have. The 9/11 families are close to the truth more now than ever before. A federal judge in Manhattan is expected to rule any time now on Saudi Arabia's appeal to toss a lawsuit against the kingdom. But if this landmark case goes forward, long buried secrets of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks will be exposed. This is the closest thing you're ever going to get to a smoking gun, said Barrett Eagleson, who was 15 years old when his dad, Bruce, died while working at the Twin Towers on 9/11. The public needs to see this. Ellison tells the Boston Herald that lawyers have obtained a video that allegedly shows a Saudi suspect casing the Capitol in the summer of 1999, pointing out where Congress sits. Ellison also says a companion sketchbook painstakingly shows an aviator algorithm of how to hit a target on the horizon when flying a plane. He credits British officials for obtaining both pieces of incredible evidence and retired FBI agent for assisting the 9/11 families who refused to give up on seeking justice nearly 23 years after the ruthless kamikaze jet attacks on New York City, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Federal Judge Daniels of the George Daniels of the Southern District of New York now holds the key to this case. The judge must decide whether this lawsuit against Saudi Arabia moves ahead or is forever thawed. If we lose, it's a dagger, he said to the Herald Friday after pointing to his kids. But what more do you need? The Saudi government latest appeal states no government official, senior or otherwise, gave any directions to the hijackers. Any contact the Saudis had was innocent motives to help fellow Saudis new to San Diego. Those Saudis were the first 9/11 hijackers to set up shop in America after landing in Los Angeles, according to multiple reports. Both Saudi officials are accused of assisting them, court documents allege, and the crux of this case, which is final showdown decades in the making, will focus on the former Southern California Al-Qaeda cell, as the Herald reported. The judge allows the case to proceed. The 9/11 families, 10,000 plaintiffs strong, who lost loved ones in the 9/11 attacks, and those still dying of cancer from working on that pile of rubbish, will be able to expand discovery. That means Al-Qaeda cells in Boston, Portland, Maine, Phoenix, Florida, and New Jersey can also be investigated fully with this new knowledge. And according to one Florida blogger who has also followed this case closely, it could force Saudi Arabia to settle out of court and issue an apology. The first two 9/11 hijackers in the United States arrived in Los Angeles on January 15, 2000, without being able to speak a lick of English. Yet records show they made it to San Diego, where they took flying lessons and flunked out, rented an apartment, and attended a mosque. Retired FBI Special Agent Stephen Moore wrote in a court deposition supporting the lawsuit that he believed that both of them were active participants in the terrorist cell associated with Al-Qaeda that provided substantial financial and logistical support to the hijackers. Those Saudi plowed American Airlines Flight 77 and to the Pentagon on September 11, 2021. All 64 people aboard, including the 5 hijackers, were killed. Another 125 victims on the ground also died. Of all the 19 hijackers, 15 of them citizens were of Saudi Arabia. They were all affiliated with Al-Qaeda and hijacked 4 jets, killing nearly 3,000 people. It's just incredible to me and every member of Congress isn't on our side in fighting for closure. Elkin added, the secrets of 9/11 can't remain buried. There is proof that the Saudi Arabian government was involved. It makes us furious. This was kept under lock and key, he added, saying the British were on their toes in the days after 9/11 when they raided the apartment of one of the Saudi Arabian supposedly members that were involved in England. No matter what happens, Ellison stressed, the public needs to see these videos that prove their point that Saudi Arabia was well aware of what was going down. Anyway, you had many places you could be with me, or you had many places you could be tonight. Chose to be here with me. For that, I'm forever grateful. We went almost 15 minutes past the hour. So for those of you that hung in, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing so. In the description of this show and all my videos, all my shows, you can see the place you can follow me on social media. Follow me. I'll follow you there as well. That's how we do this. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Like the videos and the show. And as always, please say a prayer for our brave men and women serving the United States military, our veterans, our law enforcement officers, our first responders, their families, our angel families, our blue and gold star families, and our country. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless each and every one of you. I will see you back here on Thursday night at the same time, 8 p.m. Central, for another live broadcast. Until then, take care, God bless, and I'll see you shortly.